Jordan, how do you feel about reincarnation?
I believe in it.
So what I'm hearing is you don't believe in it, but what if I told you after this episode, I could make you a believer in reincarnation?
Okay, well, you probably could convince me.
And I'm sure I could because you don't believe in it at all, not one bit.
Nope, sure do not.
So I have a case in front of me that is probably one of the best examples of reincarnation.
I'm intrigued.
Even you, with your skepticism over there, can't deny this.
I look forward to being educated.
We're told death is final, but what if it's not? The idea of reincarnation is one that's been around for centuries. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of stories of reincarnation. But this one is the most compelling one I've ever read in my life. Do you know what that story is?
I don't, but I have a feeling you're about to tell me.
Join us next week for that story and others. Just kidding.
Matthew!
This is the story of the Pollock Sisters. Now, on one hand, this could be just a story fabricated by grieving parents, or it could be the most compelling story of reincarnation that you'll ever hear. You decide, and if you choose the former, you're wrong.
Great. Super excited.
Throughout human history, there have been stories. Stories that chill us to the bone, leaving us questioning the world around us, and remind us that truth is often stranger than fiction. These tales echo through time, whispers of unexplained disappearances, restless spirits, and crimes so baffling they defy logic. Tonight, we peel back the layers of reality to uncover the darkness lurking just beneath the surface. Was it fate, chance, or something far more sinister? Journey with us as we delve into the mysterious, the supernatural, and the true crimes that have haunted our collective consciousness. This is All Things Mysterious, where the shadows hold secrets, and every story is a puzzle waiting to be solved.
Let's start with a little history of the Pollock family. John and Florence were a happily and devout Catholic family. They lived in Bristol, England. They were members of the Roman Catholic Church. And by 1957, they had 6 children, 4 boys, and 2 girls. And I will be completely honest, I did a lot of research into this, but I could not find one story about the boys, which shows me that they're really not important for this story. So I don't even know why they mentioned it in any of their stories. But I digress. The family had managed a small grocery store and a milk delivery service. Joanna, the eldest daughter, was born March 25th, 1946. When Joanna was 4, they moved to Hexham, England, where the second daughter, Jacqueline, was born April 13th, 1951. Joanna and Jacqueline were very close, and Joanna often taken a motherly role with Jacqueline. At the age of 3, Jacqueline fell and hit her forehead on the rim of a bucket. It resulted in a cut that required 3 stitches. Now, keep that little bit of information in the back of your mind, because this will come into play later. Because she was left with a small scar that was in between her eyes, just above her nose. Joanna would write and produce small plays that she would wear different costumes and perform them in front of her family. Both girls enjoyed combing each other's hair, especially their fathers, which, if you have a little girl, you know that's not uncommon. That's actually pretty common. They also enjoyed playing at the park in Hexham. So now we're going to get into not the fun stuff. Everything with the family was good until May 5th, 1957. Joanna, Jacqueline, and their friend Anthony, age 9, were walking to church on the sidewalk. At the same time, Marjorie Wynne had taken aspirin and phenobarbital. I'm probably slaughtering that, but it's an epilepsy medication with the intention of overdosing. She then got in her car intending to speed up the process. Witnesses had reported that Marjorie was driving erratically, speeding down the road, which granted it's 1957, so I don't know what the top speed of cars back then were, but so she ended up driving erratically, speeding down the road, trying to find a way to kill herself. And she came up to a brick building with some kind of divider, like basically a wall right in parallel with it, kind of. And I know I'm not describing that very well, but she then decided to drive onto the side of the walk and crash into that concrete barrier. The problem was that 3 children were standing in front of that barrier. She ended up hitting the barrier and hitting all 3 children, killing Joanna, Jacqueline instantly. Anthony would die on his way to the hospital. Now, there is conflicting reports on if she hit the kids on purpose or if she was just trying to crash and kill herself. That is still up for debate, but her motivation for this was because she wanted to die because her own children were taken away because of her mental health. She ended up being committed to a psychiatric facility and didn't get any prison time. Like, at first, that kind of upset me a little bit, but I think that was probably the right call on this. And regardless of the reason why, ultimately 2 families were devastated at the loss of their children. But this story is not about Anthony. This story is about Jacqueline and Joanna and the Pollock family. And of course, John and Florence are devastated at the loss of their girls. Before the accident, John had always believed in reincarnation. Keep that information back too. That will come in handy later. Which, if you're familiar with the Catholic faith, it doesn't necessarily go along with the Catholic faith belief in reincarnation. That honestly caused some strife between him and his wife because, it's about Catholics. She didn't believe in reincarnation. So, in fact, it almost led to them getting a divorce. After the girl's passing, Florence became pregnant again. Not too long after. I mean, it was probably a few months after, because I think they were born a little over a year after the accident. And John was convinced that they were going to have twins. No twins in their family. There was no reason for him to believe that they were going to have twins. But he so strongly believed that he was going to have twins. And that not only they were going to have twins, but it was going to be his daughter's reincarnation. Obviously, Florence wasn't convinced. The doctors weren't convinced. They all figured it was going to be a single pregnancy. John still was convinced, and he would bring it up often, that they were going to have twins. And turns out, he was wrong. Just kidding, he was right. On October 4th, 1958, Florence gave birth to twin girls, and they ended up naming the girls Jillian and Jennifer. The twins did many things that either mimicked their deceased sisters or said things that they couldn't possibly know. And that gets us into the evidence for this. So, are you ready to have your mind blown and believe in reincarnation once and for all?
Yes, I am. Please blow my mind. I am prepared.
Okay, so let's get into it. Now, despite being identical twins, they both had different birthmarks. Apparently, it's highly unusual, which I didn't know. So I had actually looked this up because that's the one thing that they kept. And we'll get into later why that's important and specifically why they brought up the birthmarks, because there is a reason behind it. But apparently, it is unusual for twins to have different birthmarks. Jennifer had a small birthmark on her left hip, which was similar to the one that her late sister, Jacqueline, had.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. And now, do you remember about the scar Jacqueline had earlier?
From the bucket.
Yep, buckets.
The bucket.
So, Jennifer also had a birthmark on her forehead, right in between her eyes, just above the bridge of her nose.
Now, not that I'm a believer of reincarnation or anything, but I've heard that there is believed to be some sort of link between birthmarks and the method or the way that a person has died in their past life.
Yeah, so we don't get into that much, but yeah, that is one of the theories that I've heard, about, like, your birthmark is directly related to how you died in the past. Obviously, in this case, that doesn't really help prove it because she didn't die from the bucket.
No, but it does leave kind of like a mark or a scar. That's kind of neato.
And then when the twins are 3 months old, the family moves to Whitley Bay, which is just east of Hexham. As the twins grow, they are able to describe Hexham without ever being there except for as babies. And granted, this is in 1960, so there's not internet. I honestly don't even know if they had TV back then. That was the dark ages.
What age are they at this point?
At that time, they're about 2 years old or so, because at age 4, they moved back to Hexham.
Okay, so at age 4, they moved back. Well, how can you describe that?
Yeah, that's why that's not the best evidence. But, I got to start it out with the least likely and move up to the really.
Well, Matt organizes his theories. That's nice. I just throw mine all in there. Anyways, interesting. Continue.
So at age 4, they move back to Hexham. And then after moving back to Hexham, the twins are able to point out landmarks. And this includes the school that Joanna and Jacqueline attended, the Hexham Abbey, and the playground the girls used to play at. They even knew how to get to the park that the girls used to play at.
I'm assuming they probably wouldn't have a single clue where those were at otherwise.
Exactly. And on a little side note here, after even doing all this research, I never actually took the time to look at what an abbey was. So I have no idea what that is, but apparently it's very important to the story.
Thank you.
That's just how my mind works. It's probably not important to know what an abbey is.
I'm not even.
I can't with you.
Okay, now we're getting into the really, really strange details. That's going to just push you over the edge.
Okay, I am prepared to be amazed and astounded.
So, they were able to identify their deceased sister's toys by name. Like dolls, they would know what their deceased sisters called them and would correctly identify the correct doll. And Florence didn't get rid of any of the toys, obviously, because they had sentimental value. But she also didn't keep them out for the kids to play. She kind of stored them away. So for them to be able to get to them and actually identify them, and the twins would ask for specific toys for each sister.
I'm assuming they had like specific names for the toys. Okay, that makes more sense because I'm assuming it's not going to be like, yeah, that's the ball I played with.
Yeah. No.
Okay, that makes more sense. Okay, so they would correspond.
Yeah, so as if they were remembering that they were their toys.
Interesting. Very interesting. I see where this is going, Matthew.
And now, too, since I've been so compelling, I don't want to push you over the edge quite yet. So we're going to get into some...
Oh, we're reeling it back.
We're reeling it back just a bit. Because the twins were said to have similar personalities to their late sisters. Joanna was always protective of her younger sister, Jacqueline. And Jillian was born 10 minutes before Jennifer. On top of acting more mature, she also seemed to watch over her sister, Jennifer. Much like the way Joanna watched over Jacqueline. Obviously, that's not super compelling. But the parents also noted that the twins enjoyed the same food and games as their late sisters.
Very intriguing.
And now, Florence was like you. She was a skeptic. She didn't believe in this at all.
Yeah, I definitely don't believe in it at all.
And she never really took much stock in John's insistence that the sisters were reincarnated. However, that all changed when she overheard the twins talking about the car accident in detail. I just got goosebumps. That was the moment that changed her mind. And it freaked me out. Now, keep in mind, they were not very open with the car accident to the children. So for them to be able to, basically talk about the accident, talk about details that they shouldn't have been able to know, that is just... I'm sure you're to the point where you're almost a believer in reincarnation at this point.
You almost got me.
This part will definitely push you over the edge. And this part is a little disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. On one occasion, Florence overheard the girls playing a game where they recreated the sisters' accident. So Jillian was sitting on the floor holding Jennifer's head as she laid on the floor saying, "The blood's coming out of your eyes. That's where the car hit you." And on a different occasion, Jillian pointed to Jennifer's birthmark on her forehead and told her, "That is the mark Jennifer got when she fell on a bucket."
That's compelling.
It is.
That is
And,
very compelling.
I know I've converted you into a believer in reincarnation
All by yourself. Yes.
single-handedly.
In just a few short minutes.
I know. I'm just that good. The twins also seem to have a fear of cars and experience reoccurring nightmares about being hit by a car. And so much so, anytime they were near cars, they would become frightened and anxious. John recalls a time when a car started its engine in an alleyway and the girls grabbed onto each other in terror, both shouting, "The car is coming to get us."
Well, that would just break my heart into pieces.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that in this situation I would be, but if minus the girls dying, originally, I would be totally the dad. It would be like, yeah, the car's coming to get you. You better run.
No, you would.
I
You
totally would.
100% with your girls. You absolutely would.
And I'm pretty sure I've probably done something like that in the past.
I'm pretty sure I've seen you do it. Pretty sure I have.
Okay, so let's wrap this up since I've already made you a believer. When the girls turned 5, and this all happened before they were 5. So yeah, that's not a lot of time. But for them to, in 5 years, convince their mom, like their dad, believed it from the beginning. But to convince their mom that they were reincarnated is pretty impressive.
That is pretty impressive because she was a pretty hard skeptic.
Oh, yeah.
Like me.
And, just like how I converted you to a believer in reincarnation in this short time, the girls
Absolutely.
did it to their mom too. And you're also going up against a pretty powerful force. Religion, is very powerful to a belief system. So you take that into account, the fact that she was a believer. I mean, that is amazing to me. But when the girls turned 5, basically most of their memories of their past lives disappeared, including the accident. Jillian was still able to describe their house in Wickham, which she had never been to, but she could describe the house and garden in perfect detail. It was the same house they lived in when Joanna was 4. But the girls would go on to live normal lives. Florence would pass in 1979 and John in 1985. And as far as I could tell, the girls are both still alive, but they don't have any memories of their past life or anything. So let's get into the theory in this case. And since I know you're on the side of the believers on this one, let's go with the first theory. And the one that you mostly agree with now is that this is proof of reincarnation. Proponents obviously use this case as an example of why reincarnation must exist. The evidence is too great to dismiss. There is a lot of evidence for it. And one of those proponents is Ian Stevenson. He's a pioneering reincarnation researcher. He heard about the case in 1963 from newspaper coverage. That same year, he met the family at their home. He interviewed the parents at length and examined the girls' birthmarks. And they were 4 at the time. He would meet the family 3 more times over the years, once in 1967, 1978, and finally in 1982. In the 1978 visit, he did a blood test on the girls to determine zygosity. And I know you're looking at me with that blanking expression like, what the heck is zygosity? And I'm probably saying that wrong. But to answer your question, that is the degree that a chromosome or gene had the same genetic sequence. Ultimately, it's to determine how much of identical twins they actually are. And the test determined that they were monozygotic or identical, which makes the fact that they had several personalities and different birthmarks. Because a lot of times personalities for, twins, especially when they're younger, they'll be more alike. And then when they get older, they kind of deviate more, which I could be totally wrong. That's just from my personal experience. So the final visit in 1982, he met with Jillian. And he would go on to write a detailed case report for the second volume of Reincarnation and Biology, a contribution to the etiology of birthmarks and birth defects, which I don't know why. Basically, that book is just based on a lot of what he did in his interviews and stuff. I'm not going to go into too much detail because, unfortunately, I can't find the second volume of Reincarnation and Biology in my local library, so I couldn't actually read it.
Such a disappointment.
Now, to go back to your original stance and how you didn't believe in reincarnation at all and you were a total skeptic, which I've converted you from, but
Back to my original beliefs. Okay.
that goes into theory too, that this case is fabricated by grieving parents, either intentionally or unintentionally. Critics say that all of the memories the girls recounted could have easily been told to them by their older siblings. Remember, they had 4 brothers that we only mentioned once and totally forgot about?
I mean, to an extent, yeah, but like, there's only so much of that you can fake, I would think.
Yeah. And now, I will stand on the side of the skeptics for just a second and say that all this evidence that we have is the parents' word for the most part.
Touche.
However, that doesn't mean that it's wrong either. And obviously, the fact that the mom went from a total skeptic to a believer, that to me is the most valid evidence there.
That's true, because for somebody to go against their own religious beliefs is huge.
Exactly. So now they say, as for the birthmarks, obviously they say that's just coincidence. The similar personalities could just be a combination of the parents' griefs and memory changing to fit the idea that the girls were reincarnated. Even though John and Florence claimed they never talked to the twins about the deceased sisters until they were older, it's not out of the realm of possibility to think that the brothers or even the grandma, aunts, or uncles could have mentioned them. And I wanted to mention that one thing I didn't mention that I should have is that the grandma of the sisters would actually lived with them to take care of the sisters while the parents were working. So they did spend a lot of time with their grandma. So that's another possibility that they could have been told.
So, did the grandma mention any of this behavior?
She never really said anything, but she never went against the family either, as far as the evidence that they were coming out with. But she also never publicly, at least none that I could tell, I could never find any instances where she publicly, of course, she probably passed away.
Well, of course, but that just makes me wonder, because if she was there, she obviously, if she was living with them, she would have witnessed the behavior as well. Because at that point, if the parents were the only people necessarily witnessing the behavior, obviously the brothers would have witnessed it as well. There would have been so many more people to see it, notice it, to experience it. The brothers may not have been as attentive to the behavior, as noticeable, but like, you would think that the grandmother would, but maybe not. Maybe she was just, you said that they were Catholic. Maybe she was, it could go either way. Like, maybe she's silent because she really truly believes and she just wants to stay out of it. Or maybe she's silent because she's not want any part of that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of it could go either way on this one. But the fact that she never, I mean, you got to take into account that back in the 1960s, this was a big story. This made the newspaper. That's how Ian Stevenson had heard about them, is because he read it in the newspaper. So it wasn't a small story that just came out after the fact. It was a pretty big story at the time. So the fact that the grandma never publicly stated that this information was false kind of leads me to believe that maybe it was, she at least believed it was accurate too.
That's fair. That makes sense.
Because she would have talked to somebody, even if it was a friend or, someone from her church or anything like that. Somebody would have came out and said, hey, she didn't believe in this at all.
It's true. There's always people who like to stir up drama, especially people in the church.
I know. Especially people who don't believe in reincarnation like Jordan.
Man, I'm a drama stirrer. Let me tell you guys. Like, Boy, am I the drama stirrer. Stirring all the pot over here.
So, I asked you at the beginning what you thought of reincarnation. So, I will ask you again. Do you think the Pollock sisters confirm the long-held idea that reincarnation is in fact real? Or is it a hoax perpetrated by grieving parents meant to keep their deceased daughters alive? And instead of asking you the question, let's ask the audience, because we'll let the audience be the judge. That's all we have time for today, people.